Good evening, Internet. I've been thinking about usernames recently, and how back when I was younger, I used to think that usernames were like this superhero name, some superhero identity that people could associate with you, like Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, Ghost Rider, whatever. It was something that people could instantly get. If it was just slapped onto a comic book cover, you would know what this person was about. Your username was supposed to be this symbol of identity, this thing that represented you. It was like the name you always wanted to have. Unfortunately, in my first couple years in online communities and meeting people on the internet, I realized I was one of the few people who felt this way. More often than not, people chose references or jokes, or there was no real sense of identity people had associated with their usernames. It was more often that people would rather be the 512th Darth Vader than choose something unique that represented them. Or even worse, people wouldn't even choose a new identity, they would just use some sort of variation of their actual name. Which I get it, but it's so boring. Why not choose something new, something that was big, something that said something? But as I spent more time on the internet, as years went by, I started to recognize that usernames had their own charm, their own unique qualities that you couldn't find anywhere else. I started to love usernames that were just one-off jokes or references because, more often than not, the people who were choosing these names were saying these things a lot, or were referencing these things a lot. And oftentimes you could just look at their username and it would be very relevant to what they were saying online, and you suddenly, in a snapshot, understood why this person chose to represent themselves in this way, because it was just some big part of their identity. Maybe it's not something they personally related with or something that was very significant to them, but it was something that they felt was appropriate. Another fun username quality is that you often don't speak usernames, so you can get away with having things that are much longer and much more wordy. And that becomes a whole other fun thing when you get into voice chat with somebody. How do you refer to these people? I've oftentimes had usernames that I thought were very clever, only to find out once I got into voice chat that people were reading them wrong or mispronouncing things. And then even more interesting is that oftentimes your username, this nickname that you've created for yourself, when you're surrounded by friends on the internet, people will shorten it for you, and you'll find a nickname within your own nickname, creating this even greater depth of familiarity, something people taking a username out of your username, something to identify you as, and it becomes this interesting thing because you start to recognize nicknames that other people will give you, and you might start to recognize people by the nicknames they give you. Eventually, I've come to the conclusion that the reason people don't treat their usernames with a great deal of significance is because it's just this very temporary identity. It's not something that's going to define you. It's something that you will come to define over time with your actions and your relationships. It's something that you choose to put meaning into, not the other way around. So I actually think younger me was kind of close, except usernames aren't our superhero names. They're not our superhero identities. They're not our alter egos. They're our masks. They're these things that we can put on and take off at a moment's notice, and people are very aware of this, how temporary these identities are. They know that not to define a person by their mask. It's more important to recognize what's going on underneath that mask. It's more important to recognize who is wearing that mask and why they might be wearing that mask. Personally, with this account, with the 404 Tales account, I've chosen the username Jack Crumb. It's by far the most boring username I've ever had, but that's kind of the point. It's my Clark Kent, because you don't need a name like Superman to leave an impact on people. You don't need a name like Batman to have an impression on someone. Sometimes Clark Kent is enough. How about you, Internet? What kind of mask are you wearing tonight? And why? Something to sleep on. I hope you have a good evening.